Okay, here we are. Welcome to the next episode of Spiritual Fertility. I'm Alison Buckland, and this is really exciting because it is the first episode where I've welcomed on a guest and making this more of a conversation, interview style. I'll introduce her in a moment, but before I hit record for this episode, we were talking about our intention for this episode. And so I will share that it is all about making the listener or bringing in the listener to have awareness that conveying that spirituality is in every facet of our lives and not just an intangible thing that is out there that is oftentimes talked about, but really how it can be woven into our everyday lives. So, our intention for this episode is to have that come through. And my first guest on Spiritual Fertility is my dear, dear friend, Danielle. And I will let her share a little bit about what she does and who she is and the facets of her life. But to give a little background, Danielle is just an amazing person in my life, has been a teacher for me, a healer for me, a friend. And the funny thing is that this is maybe only the second or third time we've ever been on Zoom together. We usually talk on the phone. And in the over 3.5 years that we've been connected, almost 4 years we've been connected, we've never met in person. And we are like soul sisters and besties, and we know lots about each other, but I'm going to let her do a lot of the talking as I kind of sit back and, kind of guide and lead and ask questions in this conversation. So welcome, Danielle. Tell
Thank you.
everybody, tell our listeners a little bit about who you are and what you do, and then we'll get into all the fun spirituality, fertility talk as we go along.
Okay, so I'm Danielle. Hi. I am a mom, single mom of two little ones, and I am my trade, what I do. I'm a Reiki practitioner, and a lot of people don't necessarily know what that is. So it is energy healing, it is channeling divine healing energy through the hands and placing the hands on somebody's body physically or by distance to relay that healing energy. There's a little bit more than that. It's very intuitive. I receive messages from my clients, let's say spirit guides or spirit team. Sometimes there's a physical sensation, sometimes it's just an emotional sensation, or you just get a message relayed. Really, what my intention is behind what I do is to help people find their way back to their own path, the path home to themselves. So all of my clients will receive steps for what their next steps are on their healing journey that's individualized for them. I do tarot card readings, oracle card readings, and stuff like that.
Yes, you do, and you're very wonderful. I've had the opportunity to work with Danielle for, oh my gosh, so long now, over 3.5 years. She's done healing sessions for me. She has channeled guides and helped me in my journey, in my healing journey, in my spiritual journey. We are very close, and actually, it's pretty funny. One of my healing guides has come to her and really emphasized the need to put this podcast into the world at this time.
Yeah.
So that's why, like, this is happening right here and right now.
Yeah, and
So
it's a little difficult to even pinpoint exactly what I do because for everybody it's different. For you sometimes it's just like giving you like your next steps, like do this particular thing, like go to church. One of your messages was, I know you're going to church, but become more involved in the church. Sometimes it's something that simple, where for other people it's like, exercise for 30 minutes a day. So it's hard to say like, oh, this is what I do because everybody is on a different area of their path. So it's just about finding your next step.
yes, and so as much or as little as you'd like to share, but talk about how you came to do this work, because this wasn't always a part of your life. And you were in a completely different industry. So when
Oh
you would
yeah.
go back to career and life satisfaction and spiritual awakening and fertility and how rebirth and transformation, what this podcast is all about, it all is interwoven in our stories and in our lives. So we met on LinkedIn when you were doing like something completely different, and you were
Yeah.
in a different part of your life. So would you mind sharing about how you came into your spiritual journey and your healing journey, and as much as you'd like to share in relation
Yeah.
to that?
Yeah, absolutely. I was married, an insurance agent for a very large, reputable insurance company. I had been for about 20 years. Um, I was, full time, kids in daycare, the typical 9 to 5, Monday through Friday, run down, stressed out, burnt out as a full time mom and full time employee. I was in a very stressful marriage. It was an abusive relationship. I did not realize I was in an abusive relationship for the majority of it. It took a long time for me to open my eyes and realize what was actually happening around me, and the stress and the burnout and that constant like feeling low. I thought that was normal for having young ones and marriage and mortgage and full-time jobs. And the more and more it came to light that I was in an abusive relationship, the way out and the way back home to myself was through healing. And healing in a toxic environment is possible. It's not impossible because I did it, but it took 2 to 3 years to do what would have taken a year had I removed myself from the toxic environment. And once you start to realize the pieces of toxicity around you, you start to become more and more aware of what is toxic and what is not. You start to realize what you deserve. Like you get to your lowest point, and it's like, wait a second, I don't deserve this. And for me, it was through a lot of meditation, a lot of reading, connecting with a lot of people on LinkedIn. As odd as that sounds, LinkedIn was a very healing environment for me. I met a lot of friends, Allison being one of them, a lot of very close friends, people that it was just a completely different vibration in there in LinkedIn, really. So the combination of starting to take care of myself, being aware of why I'm responding and reacting the way I am, how I was living most of my days in fear, uh, and then I would go to work. And I thought that was fine, until that started to become more and more obviously toxic. And it was like, wait a second, all of these things had become normal over time because it doesn't happen all at once. It's like a slow build up. And then one day you sit back and you're just like, wow, this is not the life I signed up for. Um, and then it was a slow crawl back to who I was. And that's when the I started to, what was it, Reiki started to come into my awareness, animal Reiki. And I did not want to work with humans, but the idea of working with animals always intrigued me. I knew I wanted out of the insurance industry. I knew I didn't want to be in a 9 to 5 environment. I knew it was toxic. I knew my marriage was toxic. It was a slow progression to get to where I was going. um, and then COVID happened.
Mm.
And that was the thing, that was the switch. So I was on a slow progression. I had gotten my Reiki certifications. I was practicing here and there. I was meditating, and spirit guides were coming through. I was in touch with some of my own loved ones and ancestors on a regular basis. I went through a point of time where I thought I was losing my mind and needed to be locked up in a mental facility because none of this was normal. And then I started to remember things from my childhood and how this, in fact, was normal for me. May not be a normal situation for somebody else or mirror somebody else's experiences, but this was normal for me. And I started to really get back in touch with who I was. So back to COVID happened. It was the middle of March in New York, and we had my daughter's birthday party. And the next day, the whole world shut down. Like, can't leave your house. You got to wear a mask. I mean, we know. We were all there. And it was over the course of that 2 weeks, I realized I couldn't live like this. I could not, I didn't know how long we were going to be trapped in the house. My kids weren't escaping by going to school and daycare. I was working from home. It was a toxic work environment. And now I was bringing that into my toxic home. And it was horrible. Um, that was when I decided to have my husband removed from my home by the police and get an order of protection. So that part, step one. Within 30 days of that, I had a very toxic situation come up at work and brought it to my superior's attention, who told me verbatim, you can deal with so and so's toxicity and attitude, or you can go find yourself in the unemployment line. So I said, okay, unemployment it is. And I became a stay at home mom, a stay at home single mom almost overnight after working full time 20 years, being the breadwinner. It was while I was healing from, I mean, because even though you know you're in a bad place and you get out of that, you break the tie with the reason why you feel the way you feel. In my case, my husband was removed from by the police and my home became a more peaceful environment. But there was still a lot of trauma stored inside of my body that I was now dealing with while trying to figure out how to single mom a 3-year-old and a 6-year-old. My daughter was being homeschooled. Nobody could come over and help because it was COVID. I could barely leave the house. Um, the only place to go was in. It was literally the only place I had to go was to dig deep, go within, become very aware of myself. So doing the work and digging deep, people are always like, well, what is that? It's observing everything that you do. Observe your thoughts, your actions, your feelings, and then question them. Why am I doing this? Why do I feel this way? Why is this emotion coming up? And then don't judge it. Just observe it without judgment and then go back to that and get to the root of that cause and effect. Why is it happening that way? Is there something there that needs to heal? And that has been what I have been doing ever since. And that was 3.5 years ago. So that never ends, by the way.
Oh my
I'm
goodness.
still doing that.
Yes, and we're all eternal students and we take what we learn and use those lessons. Oh my gosh, it's so funny. It just makes me think of that meme or that picture I sent you the other day where it's like since 2019 I've learned so many lessons that I feel like it's enough for 4 different lives. Yes, for
Yeah,
sure. I
it
know a
is.
lot of people will relate to that. So COVID was a couple things. COVID was definitely a catalyst for many people to wake up and make different decisions about their lives because
As hard
of,
as it was, I am so grateful for 2020. As horrible of a
oh,
year as that was across the board, I am so deeply grateful because of how it impacted me in my life.
yeah, I'm completely with you on that. I mean, my life is completely different since then myself, having been changing careers and going through, mental health journey and just continue on that path and opening up and waking up spiritually as well. So I get that. What I want to uh, commend you on and recognize that our listeners can recognize maybe within themselves is what it takes to have that courage to make a choice. Because in every decision that we have, it is a choice that we can make. And going within and taking that time to really listen and understand, in spite of what has happened to us in the past and any traumas that we've experienced, and in spite of maybe outsiders that are weighing in on maybe different situations that are going on in our lives. It really only it only comes down to us and our personal responsibility to have courage to make those choices. And you made those choices that put your life in a different direction. And it kind of comes full circle in going back to yourself and coming back to yourself and unlearning the things that maybe that were passed down or that
Yes.
you were taught. That's a big part of it. Having to be aware and conscious of the things that are happening in your life, and then we can take those lessons and teach. Part of what you do, as I know, is teach others and guide others and coach others and heal others in that way back to themselves. That is one of the uniqueness that you have within you. So I just want to kind of commend you on that, and as an example for others, that when you're in those dark places and when you are in that time of trauma and not knowing what's going on around you and having to be the caregiver and be the mom. I mean, mom first and foremost, certainly, because you have little ones to
Hmm.
look out for, but it all comes back to you and really making that choice to choose yourself first and
Right.
foremost.
Learning, one of the first things I remember, one of the first things I learned was, and I did a lot of reading about it and then a lot of physical testing with it, was what my intuition was versus my ego.
Mm.
Because I was not used to making, like, this was all new. The single mom thing was new, being home all day was new. Uh, all of the rules and regulations with COVID were new. Homeschooling was new. I was not emotionally handling a lot of things very well. Like, even food shopping was new. I was only shopping for me and my two kids. I no longer had to buy the things for the person that didn't live here anymore. Then there was like an emotional trauma, like I broke down crying in the supermarket. But these battles, these internal battles that we have, learning how intuition felt versus how ego felt was huge in being able to move forward. Because even when I didn't have the wherewithal to make a decision, I relied back on, okay, I need to feel into my intuition and and find the fear behind that ego response. And that was huge in healing and moving, um, especially with the kids. I was able to even teach my children what intuition feels like versus that back and forth feeling of ego. So we all started functioning like that a little bit better. And the fun part of it is when you start to rely on your intuition, as illogical as that intuitive guidance may be, like kick your husband out of the house and quit your job. That kind of guidance, like the crazy stuff, that is when your support system, your spiritual support system steps in. So, like, the universe literally has your back so long as you stay on the path that you're supposed to be on and you're true to yourself. Being in an abusive relationship and in a toxic work environment, doing something I really did not enjoy doing anymore. Like, the thought of going to work made me physically cringe at that point of my career. And, following that intuitive guidance, as much as I had to be forced into it by circumstances, was the best decision I ever made, because my spiritual support team was like, okay, here we go. She's ready. Here we are. Get to work. And it was a whole different world, because now, even relying on my intuition, it was like I would follow my intuition and out of nowhere, support would just appear. It would be like, a check in the mail, a supportive phone call, a podcast with the exact information that I need to go do something later that day that I was planning only in my head. Like, these crazy messages would come through just in the nick of time. And it was because I was following that guidance, as crazy as it felt at the time. And now it's just how we live our lives.
It is. It is. It gives me like tingles, like thinking about, because it's so true. It's like trusting and then the little steps. And first off, the only way is through. Like, there's no
Yeah.
other way besides moving forward. Like there's just no other way. And when it gets really tough, like just moving forward, even if it's the littlest step. But it's so fun when those synchronicities come and you're just like, yes, I like, the signs like, okay, this is exactly what I needed to hear. Or the revelation comes for what you needed to unlearn, or what you needed to let go of, or what you needed to learn, or what you needed to see to like have the courage to make the next choice. I do want to go back really quickly before we wrap it up, because I know you're someone that I will love to have on here multiple times in the future, and you have a lot of insight and things to share. But one thing that you touched on, because many of our listeners are going to be parents, is having that relationship with your children, to have that open communication about what we're learning. So you touched on teaching your kids a little bit about intuition and ego. I think that is amazing. And even today, I had, before we were stepping on to record this, like I had this little hit of message, intuition, spirit, that one day I want to have a conversation with my daughter for this podcast, just to talk about some of the things that we've been open about communicating. But talk a little bit about how you've talked to your children about some of these things, especially like intuition and like maybe ego or some of that negative self-talk, if you wouldn't mind.
Um, so the negative self-talk, Charlie has ADHD, and I don't know if it comes with ADHD or not, but he very quickly gets down on himself and starts with the negative self-talk, and he does a lot of talking out loud. So anything in his that's going on in his head is coming right out of his mouth. So he'll be like, "This is why I'm stupid. This is why I never do anything right." So I immediately stop them in their tracks. And I'm like, "Well, first of all, don't talk to my son like that. I will not allow you to talk to my son like that." And then start feeding him with the positive affirmations and have him repeat after me. A lot of times we'll do it in the morning, like, I am smart, I am confident, I am proud, I am loved, I am adorable, like things like that, specifically targeting both of my kids if they start to get down on themselves. So whatever it is that they're saying. So in Charlie's case, this is why I'm stupid. So I bring up a lot of things like, I am smart, I am confident, I am creative. So like those are three that will target the I am stupid one. So things like that. The intuition with kids, this stuff is so easy with kids. We complicate everything. So these conversations with my kids are like super simple. Intuition is the feeling before the thought. I didn't have to say much more than that to them. I go, that feeling you get right before you have the words in your head, the thought, that feeling. They're like, yeah, yeah, that's your intuition. The thought when you go, well, maybe this or maybe that, or maybe this or maybe that. I go, that is fear, which is ego. They go, oh, okay. So the feeling is what to go on. Like, yeah, yeah, that's pretty much it, guys. And like
Yeah.
they just had it like that. Kids, like I said, are so easy. One thing I covered with Charlie recently, he was upset about having to go somewhere, and it was like, it's gonna be boring, it's gonna be horrible. He's 6, and he's like screaming and over dramatic and proclaiming and stating how it's gonna be. So we had a talk about the 12 universal laws, and the one in particular, the law of attraction, and that what you put out there is what you're going to get back. And how if you say it's going to be boring, it's going to be horrible, then it is, because you're telling the universe, and then they're going, okay, here you go. This is what you wanted on a silver platter.
Hmm.
So I said, don't say that. What we're going to do is, I'm afraid it's going to be boring. So let's find some things that will keep me from feeling that way. Let's make sure so that way when I go, it's going to be fun and exciting and whatever the opposite of boring and terrible is to a 6-year-old boy. Um, and that redirection and that explaining. And I said to him, this is just how the world works. There's nothing you can do about it. These are the laws. That's just how it works. And he was, okay, went in his room, got something that he could keep himself entertained at the location he was going to be at. And it was so simple because they're little. There's not all that
Yes.
clutter in their brains.
No, no, not all the passed down, all the things that we have.
Mhm. I
But
will warn
we,
you, you have to be careful, especially with the older ones. I will warn, especially all the moms out there. Your older children will call you out on your BS when you're not walking your talk. When they
Mhm.
really start to learn, they start to hold you accountable. And it's those moments that you have to check yourself before you reprimand them because they're right. You're
Yes.
not walking your talk, and
Yeah.
it takes you by surprise the first time. It's like, oh, you sound like one of my spirit guides.
But I mean, they're watching, they're listening, and what gets repeated is what stays. And I just love the how it really is a lesson for us too in sharing, listening to how you were talking. It really is simple. We don't need to overcomplicate it. And I look forward to hearing more in the work that you do on those 12 spiritual laws. So, what are you up to now? So, a couple things. What are you working on right now? And then we'll put like how our guests or how our listeners can contact you, but how folks would be able to get in touch with you if you wanted to work with you. I can certainly vouch for Danielle's healing, for her tarot card readings and oracle card readings. Certainly wonderful, magical, for sure, for sure. So, yeah, what are you working on right now?
So I am right now, I primarily work with people who are just starting on their spiritual path. And I have not been putting content out on any of my social media. So right now I'm working on putting things together, to the basics, the 12 universal laws, gratitude, intuition versus ego, the basics, moon cycles, how to work with the moon, just information like that. So I'm putting content together for people who are just starting to dabble and just starting to get their feet wet a little bit. They have some basics, like the 101 roadmap to your spiritual journey. So I'm working on that, and then I'm always offering sessions and working with people one on one and things like that. So
Exactly. What's your website?
it is healinggoddess22.com.
Perfect. Yes, I know. I just wanted you to share it. Awesome.
And that
Well,
is also basically how you can find me anywhere. Healing Goddess 22. You'll find me on LinkedIn, on Facebook, on Instagram, and that is my email address at gmail.com.
yeah, perfect. So for anybody who wants to reach out and get in touch with you, and just really in closing, is there anything that pops in that you'd like to share?
Hmm. No, not really. I
That's
can't think
quite
of
all right.
anything. My mind just went completely blank.
That's all right. That's okay. No, I appreciate you coming on and being my first guest, and for the role that you've played in my life as a friend and as a mentor and teacher and guide and all of those things. So I am so grateful for you and for the uh, kick, I guess, through my healing guide to move this along. So I just appreciate that.
Yeah.
It wouldn't be moving forward if you hadn't played a part. So thank you so much.
The nudges. And thank you for having me. I always love chatting with you, but I like this. I like doing this on Zoom where I can see you. We need to do this more often, podcast or not. I like this.
Right. Yeah, it's fun. We will.
Yeah.
We will. Yeah, when we can
Okay.
connect for sure.
Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you so much. So, for those that are listening, please subscribe to Spiritual Fertility, write a review to the podcast wherever you listen to podcasts to help us grow, share with a friend who is a mom, who is somebody who is on their spiritual journey, who is looking for help and guidance and inspiration and tools for their own growth and journey, and also just how to live their best life and make the choices every day that we need to make to have life and career satisfaction and be the best that we can be. Thank you very much, and we will talk to everybody soon. Bye bye.